Hey everybody, it's Curtis again. Chapter 2, EMR, Workplace Safety and Wellness. Let's go ahead and get started. So, introduction, your patients, families, everybody can experience various degrees of stress and grief during and following a medical emergency. If you haven't been around for very long, it doesn't take long to realize that everybody's going to feel and process these things differently. Some people just keep right on moving, and it kind of bothers some people. So we've got to recognize that stress and grief can certainly change some things for us. So to fulfill your duties as an EMR, though, you need to be in a pretty good physical condition. You need to be able to be available to help people. As a new EMR, you should have a complete physical exam to ensure you're healthy enough to do your job, and whatever that means. Make sure your department says you're good to go and not putting yourself at any kind of risk. So emotional aspects of emergency medical care. So providing emergency medical care, as you can imagine, as an EMR is probably going to be pretty stressful. You're going to put yourself in a lot of places that some people don't want to be in, and we're asking to go to those places. So learn how to avoid unnecessary stress and how to prevent your stress level from getting too high. Now, as you can imagine, some calls are more stressful than others. So maybe someone who is in the same age demographic or something as a family member. Very young or very old patients can be a problem. Critical patients, obviously, and death as well. Those can all provide some additional stress to us. So the most stressful calls include, we're still continuing this on, unusual danger, violence, unusual sights, smells, or sounds, which seems weird, but all of a sudden later on, you start having little flashbacks of sights and smells and sounds. So mass casualties in Oklahoma, you have a decent chance, a better than decent chance of maybe being in one between, a bad crash on the highway or obviously a natural disaster. We have opportunities to be involved in these. Emotional aspects of emergency medical care, still talking, because you work in a stressful environment, you must make a conscious effort to prevent and reduce unnecessary stress. So the way we do that, some of the ways, learn to recognize signs and symptoms of stress. That helps us. We can start kind of alleviating some of that. Adjust your lifestyle to include stress-reducing activities. So, for many of us, it might be going to the gym or just spending some time with important people or important relationships. Learn which services and resources are available to help you. So now, grief reaction triggers. Those things include death of a loved one, serious illness, drug or alcohol addiction, incarceration. All those things that are listed are grief reaction triggers. 5 stages of reaction to death and dying. You've probably heard many of these, but denial. When we start looking at these, these things, these normal reactions of stress, they can affect all of us. And especially the people that are providing some emergency medical care, because dying is one of the most stressful experiences that people may have. The grief reaction to death and dying provides a basis for looking at stress. So, there was these whole 5 stages of reactions to death and dying that a doctor came up with, and here's what we're talking about. Denial, so essentially not me. Person experiencing denial cannot believe what's happening. Then we move on to anger. So why me? Understanding that anger is a normal reaction to stress should help EMRs deal with anger that's directed at them. Many times someone may have some anger directed at you, and it's not abnormal or uncommon. You need to understand that it has nothing to do with you. It's at the situation. And then bargaining. So kind of thinking about, okay, but bargaining is an act of trying to make a deal to postpone death and dying. And then depression, heavy-hearted, person who is unusually silent or who seems to retreat into their own world may have reached this stage. And then acceptance. It does not mean that you're satisfied with the situation. It just means that they understand that death and dying cannot be changed. Now, recognizing stress. We're talking about within ourselves. Some of these things, irritability and inability to concentrate, change in normal disposition, difficulty sleeping, anxiety. These are all things that you might find in yourself or with your coworkers. Warning signs: loss of appetite, loss of interest in sexual relations, loss of interest in work, isolation. All of these things could certainly be a real problem. alcohol or drug misuse or abuse. These are just different ways that people they're kind of exhibiting that they're dealing with a lot of stress and may need some help with it. Drink. Active EMS providers need to drink adequate amounts of fluid. We just talked about alcohol and drugs, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about lots and lots of water. So a couple, you notice between here and there, you'll notice in your book a couple of the slides are missing, but you can read about the food pyramid and all of that. So active EMS providers need to drink adequate amounts of fluid every day and avoid consuming excessive caffeine and alcohol. And then just be merry, just be happy if you can. When a person's happy, he or she generally does not experience an elevated level of stress. It's important to learn to balance your lifestyle. Be merry may be a little easier said than done, but there is an interesting connection between, really basic connection between your smile and your brain, and even things like dopamine and these neurotransmitters that produce that happy, euphoric feeling. So sometimes you can kind of trick your brain into, at least for a little bit of getting a move on with some happiness, literally just by smiling, and you'll notice that it feels like some negativity is kind of lifted up, and if you're able to just kind of parlay that into some positive thoughts, then you can just keep moving forward with that. Other ways to prevent stress: spend time with your friends and family, hobbies, exercise, meditation, religious activities, assistance from a mental health professional. So, it's not been that long we've actually started talking about this stuff. It's been in all the textbooks for years, but for the most part, up until just a few years ago, it was pretty much just suck it up, buttercup type mentality. What people need to understand that dealing with this stuff, it's not a weakness. It doesn't suggest that you can't handle the job. It's just a natural human reaction, and it can be managed. The thing is, it needs to be managed. So it doesn't need to get out of control. You need to understand what's going on, and it's not a problem that a call bothers you. For me, it's a problem if certain calls don't bother you, doesn't bother a person. That tells me that there's some other stuff going on. So still reducing stress, benefit from the help of a mental health professional, CISM, so critical incident stress management, comprehensive stress available through some public safety departments. Now, crew resource management, so working together all as a big team. It's a way for team members to work together with leaders to develop and maintain a shared understanding of the emergency situation. A big part about that is going to be maintain a shared understanding of the emergency situation, because some of this is going to be done as a team. So in the loud and often hectic environment of EMS, it's easy for errors to occur. It's easy as a paramedic for drug errors to occur. It's easy, I've been on a helicopter before, and it's very easy to not to hear things differently or to get distracted by things or whatever. So it is pretty hectic in all of this. So when you believe there's an immediate or potential problem brought to the team leader's attention, then you use this acronym here as PACE. And probe, look or ask to confirm the problem, basically make sense of the situation. Alert, so communicate the problem to the team leader. Challenge, if the issue is not corrected, clearly challenge the team's present course of action. And then emergency. So if the problem is clear and critical, such as an immediate safety issue, then immediately communicate the emergency to the entire team. In helicopter EMS, you had 3 members. You had a pilot, a nurse, and a paramedic. And if one said no on a flight, then it was a no. Everybody had an equal vote, and all it took was one no to shut down a flight for whatever reason that was. You better be able to answer why. Not just because you didn't feel like making a flight, but workforce safety. As an EMR, you'll encounter a wide variety of hazards at emergency scenes. So it's important for you to recognize these hazards and to know which steps you need to take to minimize the risk they pose to your patients, your partners, and your stress. So workforce safety is going to be a pretty important thing. Section covers hazards you'll encounter, including infectious diseases, crime and violence, all kinds of stuff that you see listed within your curriculum. Lots of diseases. We don't need to talk about diseases. We've been talking about that for almost 2 years now. But there's lots of diseases. My whole deal is, the way that I train and treat people is, if you treat everybody like they're sick, sooner or later when you run into somebody, you'll be prepared. So you just wear gloves when you're supposed to, and you wear face protection when you're supposed to, and you treat everybody like they're sick, and everybody goes home at the end of the day. So go ahead and read through these things: direct contact, indirect contact with infected blood, talking about the routes of transmission. Gives you a little bit of different things about pathogens and airborne pathogens, bloodborne pathogens. So HIV is transmitted by contact with infected blood. Most people should be aware of this. No evidence of transmission by contact with other bodily fluids, though, unless there is some visible blood in there. And if you're not aware of this, some people don't even know that they're sick. So that's why if we treat everybody like they're sick, then we'll be good to go. So as you see that, so EMR should always wear gloves. Sometimes people don't know that they got something. Then you need to be prepared. So standard precautions. Federal regulations require all healthcare workers, including EMRs, to assume that all patients are potentially infected with pathogens that can spread by direct contact, airborne transmission, or blood. So standard precautions for bloodborne: always wear approved latex or nitrile gloves. Change them after each patient. Wash hands with soap and water after removing your gloves, and then always wear a protective mask or eyewear if you have the ability to do that. Wash your hands. Wash everything afterwards. This shouldn't be an issue. Bend, use needles and all that. You guys shouldn't be using needles, but in the event that you're placed in a position that you do need one, you don't recap needles. You just drop them directly into the sharps container, and you don't mess around. Don't give yourself an opportunity to poke yourself. So standard precautions for airborne pathogens, steps recommended by the CDC, they all vary depending upon what's going on at the time and what there is. You see all the stuff. You see all the big words here. So I'm going to let you read through that. Not much really to talk about. And it's something will be going on, and there's some videos for it, but about how to put on PPE. Immunizations recommended for EMS responders. That'll all be based upon probably what your department asks that you do. So responding to a scene safety, going to be really important, most important consideration to you as an EMR. So safety considerations to include your own safety, and then all the other people present at the scene. So your own personal safety, your partner safety, your patient safety, then bystanders. That's kind of the order that you want to think about things. So as a point there, an injured or dead EMR cannot help those in need. And that's a really important thing, is if you make a bad choice to lift someone without the additional help that you need, or to get into a vehicle that's not cribbed and you have no business getting into, or whatever, that, kind of playing hero, an injured or dead EMR cannot help those in need. So you're not going to be able to do much good for anybody if you're all jacked up. Drive safely, always fasten your seatbelt, just follow your protocols. Use dispatch information to anticipate hazards. Be familiar with your hazmat stuff, at least awareness, if not ops. Be familiar with your guides on how to look at placards and to know what's going on. Be familiar with your local, your district or response area, whatever that is, whether it's within your compound of your business or the district of your city or county. Be familiar with all of that. As you see your response, fasten your seatbelt. Plan your best route. Drive quickly but safely to scene. Remember, we don't have the same luxury that a lot of times the police drive with, which is, sometimes it seems like they drive with the, hey, everybody get out of my way thing. We're having to ask for permission. So you're making sure to clear your intersections. You're making sure to make good decisions. Park your vehicle so it protects the area from traffic hazards. So you want to use it as actual protection. Be sure the warning lights are operating correctly. You want to leave some lights on. If it's late at night, you don't want all of your high visibility lights on, because it just tends to blind people. Typically, people want kind of their secondary lights on, but you'll follow your local protocols with whatever that means. You'll hear that a lot. That's kind of the easy way to get out of specifics, because your local protocols will be different probably than the local protocols that I have. So within all of these, you'll follow your local protocols. And then be careful when getting out of your vehicle. I actually have worked with a guy. He was a large fella, but he stepped out and actually tore the ligaments, I guess, or tendons in his ankle because he rolled his ankle just getting out of the ambulance. So be careful. You never know where you're stepping out into or what you're stepping into, especially if you're working rural EMS or fire, all kinds of stuff. As well as just some unsafe scenes when you're on the side of on a roadside, when you're in a busy intersection, all of that stuff. Be careful when you get out of your vehicle. Wear your approved safety vest. Make sure everybody has a reflective safety vest. And if your vehicle is not needed, park it out of the way of traffic. Get it out of the way. Don't cause more problems for people. But if it's needed, don't go moving it just to make somebody happy. It's there for protection for us. So we're talking about assessing the scene now. Scan the entire area carefully to determine what hazards are present and then address them in the most appropriate order. So, like traffic, you want to control the flow of traffic on a busy highway, so you're going to need to use your partners, whether that's local PD, county, sheriff, highway patrol, whoever, but you're going to need to phone a friend here and make sure that someone is helping you. If you need more help to handle traffic, call for assistance. What could end up happening is if you guys are responding and you're responding in an ambulance where you're able to transport someone and you're in an unsafe area, whether that means on the roadside or in an apartment complex, whatever, you may need to quickly load the patient up and then go somewhere that's safe, which means out of the roadside, out of the intersection, and then just pull over where it's nice and safe and calm and do your physical assessment there. That's where we talked about improvising. We may have to improvise our way through some of this. So crime or violence, if you're trained in law enforcement procedures, follow your local protocols. There we go. If you're not law enforcement, proceed very carefully. So if you're dealing with crime or violence, you want to be thoughtful. It's going to be really good to have PD on scene and they've cleared the scene and they tell you that the scene is safe and they tell you to come in. What's the good of going into a violent scene and you getting hurt as well? So if you have doubts about the safety of a scene, wait at a safe distance. So you might hear the word staging. Stage. Don't just stage around the stinking corner. I've heard stories of this, that people stage right around the corner from a gang shooting or a violent scene or whatever, and next thing you know, they get drug into it because they're not far enough away. Don't even go into the neighborhood. Don't even go into the housing addition or whatever and until it gets cleared. Just be within 1 to 2 minutes of being able to get to that scene. If the scene involves a crime, take a mental picture and avoid disturbing anything at the scene unless it's necessary. Don't go kicking stuff. Don't go moving stuff. Get your patient, get in, get out. That's what you want to do with a crime scene. Now, crowds. Crowds can be friendly and they can be hostile. So, it's a lot easier just to not make assumptions and just basically treat everybody like they're not going to help you out very much and take care of your patient and get moving. So you want to assess the crowd's mood before you get into a position from which you cannot exit. You always want to have a good route to get out, an easy way to get into your ambulance and drive out. Get law enforcement to help you. You may have to wait for the arrival of police before you approach the patient. The next thing we're talking about, electrical hazard. So don't approach a scene if there's indication of electrical problems. So keep all other people away from the source of the hazard. Make sure the electrical current's been turned off by a qualified person before you get close to the source of the current. Wear a helmet with a chin strap, face shield. Those are the things we're talking about with electrical hazards. And then fire. Trained firefighter, if you're a volunteer firefighter, or maybe you're a career firefighter and you just happen to come up on the scene, then hopefully you're going to be able to be trained to do what you need to do. Otherwise, then think about what you do and do not know. So if you're trained, follow the rescue firefighting procedures as established for your department. If you're not trained, do not exceed the limits of your training. So never enter a burning building without proper turnout gear. Make sure you carefully assess the fire hazard before you determine your course of action. Lots of things, lots of ways to get hurt here, guys and gals. So hazardous material, they can be found almost anywhere. We're hoping that you're going to see these placards here, that you're going to see all of this to kind of give us an idea. Federal regulation says that vehicles should have some of that on there. Hopefully it's going to. Hazardous material, believe a crash may involve hazardous materials. You want to stop uphill and upwind. Otherwise, it'll run down on you and blow down on you. So make sure that you're uphill and upwind. Odors or fumes can be the first indication of hazmats. So hazardous materials. Call for assistance. You may have to call from a partner department. You may, maybe you're outside Oklahoma City and you don't have any type of hazmat, crew or something, and you have to call for a mutual aid from someone that has it. Maybe it was Oklahoma City or whoever does, whatever near you that might have it. Remain far enough so you do not become an additional casualty. That's several times we've talked about us not becoming patients. So make sure you're making good choices, and we're not climbing into unstable vehicles, and we're not going into burning buildings, and we're not doing things that are outside kind of our scope of things, as well as dangerous scenes and all of that. That we're making good choices. It's really easy to get caught up in kind of that, for lack of better terms, just kind of this hero mentality of, if I don't get them right now, something bad's going to happen, and there may be some truth to that. But you also have to weigh it out with, but what if I'm not able to go home at the end of the day? So you have to make good choices, choices that are not easy at times for everybody. Unstable objects. So they need to be stabilized after an accident. They need to be stabilized before you assess the patient or begin patient extrication. I've been in several scenes where people are getting extricated out and the vehicle was not properly stabilized. The next thing you know, now we've got more than one hurt person. So undeployed airbags, they also another hazard that you might see. Fire and explosions can result in unstable buildings. Assess stability before attempting to enter a building. And then make sure you're calling for trained people. If you are not trained for whatever kind of rescue you guys have going on, make sure that you get the right people there that are. And then sharp objects. So lots of broken glass. Obviously you've seen it already, but if you haven't, you will very soon. Like your first car crash, you're going to have lots of broken glass. So be careful though. It's very easy to get some on you and get some in you and all of that. So sharp objects are frequently present at an emergency scene. So it could be glass, could be broken glass, or maybe needles. When you go up and you're questioning someone that's kind of altered, altered level of consciousness or something, you put your hands in their pockets or something, and they happen to have a needle in there. So be careful. Make sure that you're making good choices of where you're touching and what you're grabbing. Animals. Can be pets, farm stock, wild, these little dogs that are with Mimas, they're little chihuahuas and little bitty ankle nippers, they will come at you, so be prepared for that. And then environmental conditions. So dress appropriately for the expected weather. If you are expecting to be out on a scene for a long time, you may need heavy coats, you may need light shirts, you may need lots and lots of water, or the ambulance to be warm. If you're out searching for a person in the cold, the ambulance may need to be kept warm so you're able to bring a hypothermic person in. So think about that stuff. And then special rescue situations. So water rescue, ice rescue, all of these things. If you are not trained and that is not your position or your abilities, don't go mess around with it. So make sure you're making good choices. And when you assess these scenes and make sure you are the right person for these calls. And that, friends, is chapter 2. And I'll see you for chapter 3.